Hello and welcome to another Brawl video. This week my supporters on Patreon voted for Krang, Utrom Warlord, a 9 mana 9/9 with Flying, Trample, Indestructible and Haste, giving other artifact creatures we control those same abilities. So an incredibly powerful finisher in a deck that can ramp it out in a timely fashion, especially if we then also have some other powerful artifact creatures that we get to enhance. So our deck is pretty straightforward. If we take a look at our deck breakdown, we've got a pretty big ramp section, some 2, 3, even 4 and 5 mana ramp cards to try and get to 9 as quickly as possible. And then we've got some additional artifact creatures that we can use to help close out the game, or in the event that maybe our commander gets answered. And then our miscellaneous section here includes a few more sources of card advantage that we can ramp into, and also multiple colorless planeswalkers that can also provide additional card advantage and provide some additional resources along the way. So no huge Eldrazi that we're trying to ramp out in this deck, since we're mainly focusing on big artifact creatures instead. So that's our rough breakdown. Now for the deep dive, starting with our mana acceleration. Mox Opal is perfect in a deck full of artifacts as a free mana generator. The Artificer can also tap for colorless. Then we've got our typical 2 mana ramp artifacts like Cold Steel Heart, Guardian Idol, Mindstone, Solar Transformer, and the Iron Crag. And then It That Heralds the End, while not an artifact creature, still discounts our colorless spells with mana value 7 or greater, and still gives our other colorless creatures +1/+1, so that also applies to all the artifact creatures in this deck. Ornithopter of Paradise, another mana creature in artifact form. And then once we move up the curve at 3 mana, there's Thran Spider, making a Power Stone, and we'll have a bunch of cards throughout with Power Stone tokens associated, and those are also very synergistic when we're ramping out big expensive artifacts. Then there's Cloud Key to discount our artifacts by 1 mana, same with Foundry Inspector. The Flesh Raker, another Eldrazi, but can make spawn tokens whenever we cast a colorless spell, which also happens with all our artifact spells. And then we also get to ping the opponent for 1 whenever another colorless creature enters, so that can also quickly add up. The Network Terminal just ramps and can give us a bit of card selection. Pristine Talisman ramps while gaining some life. Skyclave Relic we can maybe kick to give us 3 ramp artifacts. And the Unstable Obelisk can also be sacrificed to destroy an opposing permanent. Then the Moonsilver Key we're mainly sacrificing to search up our 5 mana Forsaken Monument, which is also a legal target for it, and then it essentially doubles the mana produced by our lands, which can be very powerful, as well as gaining a life and bumping up our colorless creatures. We've got Coalition Relic, a more recent addition, can potentially store up an extra mana and generate 2 mana in 1 turn. Same with a Mirror if it survives. Sculpting Steel can also copy one of our ramp artifacts early on, or maybe one of our finishers later in the game. Semblance Anvil can give our stuff a 2 mana discount if we pitch the right card to it. Usually want to pitch an artifact to it, maybe even artifact creature, so we can also discount our Eldrazi by 2. Then there's a Weathermaker, a recent addition from Ninja Turtles, that can make mana, and once we get enough counters through Landfall, it can make 2 mana or even deal 3 damage. Worn Power Stone is another very powerful one, making 2 mana if we get to untap with it. Hedron Archive at 4 mana can also immediately tap for 2, same with the Ring. We also have Jorah's Familiar, discounting all our historic spells by 1. Solemn can find a land, we are allowed to get basic wastes with it. Then we mentioned Forsaken Monuments. A Gilded Lotus can immediately tap for 3 mana, similar to the Eternity Elevator, which could also be stationed. And then Karn Legacy Reforged is both a powerful finisher once we get Krang in play, as it turns into a 9/9 with all those powerful abilities, but it can also generate a bunch of mana to cast Krang in the first place, assuming it survives. And then the Mightstone and Weakstone as a Power Stone can also help cast our artifact spells, making 2 mana for those, and while it enters we also get to draw 2 or maybe take out an opposing creature. And then Ultima also doubles the mana produced by our colorless lands, so another payoff similar to the Forsaken Monument. And then we get to some of our artifact creatures. Chrome Dome pumps up our other artifact creatures and also has a 5 mana ability where we can make a token that's a copy of another artifact we control. Can also be powerful with some of our creatures that have good enter the battlefield abilities. Patchwork Automaton grows as we cast more artifact spells. Steel Overseer can put +1 counters on all our artifact creatures. Physic is very similar, can also draw cards by removing those counters. Liberator lets us play our artifacts and colorless spells at instant speed, and also gets bigger as we play bigger spells. Nettlecyst scales with the number of artifacts and enchantments we control, so a good reason to include a few artifact lands in the mana base to help grow it. We've got Lodestone Golem, taxing all non-artifact spells by 1 mana. This is symmetrical, but of course it's mostly going to affect our opponent. Then Wormcoil, a 6/6 with Death Touch and Lifelink, splits into a pair of 3/3 tokens with those same abilities. We've got Mere Battlesphere making 4 1/1 tokens when it enters. Can also maybe tap those tokens to increase its power. We've got Thunderhulk making 3 Gnome tokens when it first enters, assuming no other Anthem effects, and then can make even more when it attacks. So another card that's especially powerful with haste. Same with the Cityscape Leveler, as it can destroy stuff when we cast it, and once again when it attacks. And then Sundering Titan is perfect in a colorless deck, as we're not going to have to destroy any of our own lands, while hopefully blowing up a bunch on the other side. And Metalwork Colossus we can routinely cast on the cheap, sometimes even for free if we have enough non-creature artifacts in play. It's another card that's excellent with Krang alongside it. And then we get to our miscellaneous section, where Tezzeret can potentially untap some of our artifacts and pick up additional loyalty. We have Karn Living Legacy. This is slightly enhanced on Arena compared to the paper version. Not sure if I would play the normal version, but still a great way to make additional Power Stone tokens, draw additional cards, and eventually the emblem is also very powerful. The One Ring can also draw us additional cards and protect us for a turn. Karn, Scion of Urza, makes one of these Karnstruct tokens that also scales with the number of artifacts we control. Mystic Forge can help us play colorless spells off the top of the deck. The Inner Sun makes our stuff uncounterable and lets us discover 5 each turn. Nexus of Becoming draws an extra card each turn and can potentially put an artifact from our hand onto the battlefield in the form of a 3/3 Golem. And then we've got the 2 Ugin Planeswalkers, discounting our colorless spells by 2, and exiling opposing permanents when casting colorless spells. And finally Kozilek's Command, another incredibly versatile card that can also maybe help us ramp early on by making additional spawn tokens. And then the mana base is another main strength of these colorless decks, as every land has some useful ability. We've got lands that can gain us additional life when they enter, or maybe Scry or Surveil to improve our draw steps. A bunch of creature lands we can also animate, including these artifact creature lands, which have additional synergy with our commander, and then even some built-in removal. So a lot of useful lands, and you can kind of pick and choose whichever ones you like, but I especially recommend the ones here on the left, which are mostly pretty cheap to get, since they're often commons and uncommons that let you Scry and Surveil, and at the end of the day, those are the most valuable lands you can have in this deck. So yeah, that's our deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Okay, we're on the play, facing 5-color shrines. We've got a decent hand with some early mana acceleration. Not in a hurry to Surveil. Turn 2 Mindstone, turn 3 Familiar, maybe Kick, Relic. On turn 4. And then we're not too far from casting our commander. Opponent fetching with Polluted Delta. We'll see if it's for a mana creature or just to Surveil. Or get a Tri-land. Well, Sundering Titan is gonna be pretty much game over if we can cast it in a timely fashion. Our opponent's gonna have plenty of lanes like the Triome that we can blow up. So we could even get 5 different lanes if we're lucky. As our opponent gets another Triome. Alright, I guess I'll still wait another turn on the Surveil. Play Familiar. And hope it survives. Alright, Fruitful Harvest is acceptable. And I'm just gonna play the Relic. Keep another land on top, that's good. Play this with Kicker. Sadly, the tokens enter tapped, so I couldn't play Physic afterwards. But I do get to increase my speed, which could maybe matter once we get to max speed here, as we can tap this for 2. But yeah, next turn we're looking at Sundering Titan. Right now would blow up 2 lanes. The summit is safe. And a Cultivate, so that's 2 more basics. So, do we get to destroy 4 lanes? They do technically have a counter spell up. So how much mana do we have total? 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So I could play Physic just to check for a counter spell, and then still play Sundering Titan. They did hold priority, so it's possible they've got something in hand. Oh man, do I go for it now? It is so tempting. What can they have? Wash Away wouldn't work. Yeah, let's go for it. Alright, that resolves. So unless they can counter the trigger, that's 4 lanes gone. And that's game. Sweet. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing Tourach, mono black, discard. Yeah, those can be pretty brutal. Just need to get our mana in play and then be in a position where we can cast the spells we top deck. At least our opening hand doesn't have too many expensive spells. Can Cold Steel Heart, maybe copy it with Sculpting Steel. And probably just ignore the creatures for now. And then maybe wait on the Scry. Don't want to wait too long, since eventually our opponent can make us discard those lands as well. Semblance Anvil, okay. Kinda like that. So just play Cold Steel for now. And then what I could do is Semblance Anvil, pitch Automaton, which will discount both artifacts and creatures by 2, in case we draw some non-artifact creatures. And then I could Sculpting Steel, copy the Anvil, pitching Liberator, so now we discount everything by 4. It doesn't leave me with any creatures, of course, but I think the upside is there. So next turn I could cast Krang before our opponent gets to kick Tourach. And then yeah, Indestructible is hard to get rid of. Can play this for free first. Not bad. Get in for 11. We're empty-handed, so the discard effects don't matter. Obliterator we can just fly over. So we're looking at a 2-turn clock. Ugin, sadly I cannot cast, so that one is probably going to get discarded. Urza's Cave could go digging for a land. Or I can just activate Fountain Port, which is probably better at this point. So they need a pretty specific answer to answer Krang. The Tithe Extractor, target creature gains Death Touch. Deal combat damage, make a treasure. That's fine. So they currently still don't have an answer to Krang. Grief is gonna have a look and take Ugin. Otherwise I could have made a treasure to guarantee casting it here. But again, we're not gonna need it. Could also make a fish. I guess I get to make a treasure regardless. need something that exiles a creature, and there's not too many of those for just 2 mana. Yeah, that's not gonna work. Alright, and we drew the Author Ugin, which also was a decent draw here. On to the next one. Alright, we're on the play, facing Flubs. The Fool tends to be kind of a single-player landfall experience, but we've got a fine opening hand, so we'll give it a shot. Starting with Eldrazi Temple, put a Fear in him. Can wait a bit longer on the Scry from Rumble Arena. If we draw land, we know we don't need to prioritize them. If we don't, we might want to look for land 4. Opponent does have a turn 1 Elvish Mystic and a Mishra's Bauble. Okay. For now, maybe start with Ornithopter, because we can tap Mindstone the turn we play it. And with a discount from Inspector, that basically makes it free. Flubs is there already. Can play extra lanes. They're quickly gonna get empty-handed. And then a Flubs turns into a nice card draw engine. But yeah, that's a pretty powerful turn 2 already. Flesh Raker's not bad either. So if I go for Inspector into Mindstone, I do miss out on a bunch of Flesh Raker triggers. So I might want to get this in play first, and then not play the Mindstone yet, even though I could go Mindstone into Flesh Raker. And sure, I'll scry now. Opponent wants to see before we scry. That's a little strange, because what if we get rid of it? Although Thran Spider I'm happy to keep. Giving the opponent an extra Power Stone. It's probably not the end of the world. I guess we do have an Eldrazi Temple, so then I can go Flesh Raker into Mindstone here, as opposed to saving it. Alright, and then pass a turn. And then Mere Battlesphere with Krang is pretty juicy. Bolt Wave deals 3, okay, that's fine. Opponent does get to transform Tamio, could have maybe attacked first.
Every plane has stories to share.
And a Ragavan's not a bad leftover. Their opponent gets to keep going through the deck. They probably have a lot of cheap spells. Yeah, it's all a 1-drop so far. And 2 mana artifacts.
Use your words.
Still probably gonna name robots. We do have Chrome Dome in the deck as well. So we've got our blockers in place. And the damage from Flesh Raker's also adding up. So next turn cast an uncounterable Krang. And maybe follow that up with a Battle Sphere. Opponent's out of action. Targets Bolt Wave so they can keep drawing cards. Safekeeper draws. So we'll see for how long they can keep going. A looting. Draw 2, discard 2. Can still be flashed back as well. And a Lanor Elves. Although they're not really building up to anything big. If their deck is built with a lot of cheap spells to keep going with Flubs, then what's the real payoff? It's usually landfall cards, although they decided to get rid of Bill. Alright, let's alter creatures tap for mana. So our opponent does have a huge mana advantage. Squelcher we don't really care about. Still has a land left. And now we might be at the end of the line. Okay, we finally get to take another turn. Cast Krang, make sure it's uncounterable. And then I'm a little bit short of playing the Battle Sphere. But yeah, if our opponent's got nothing, this is an attack for 14 in the air. Tamio didn't plus last turn, so this could just be lethal. And yeah, there we go. Nice and simple. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing Salacinder and Soot. So the Alchemy Commander. Our hand is functional, assuming Artificer survives, and we get to the Mightstone to maybe deal with our commander. If Artificer gets answered, then our hand is pretty slow. And then no real preference. Sanctum of Ugin makes it so that if we cast our commander, we can search up some other curve topper. And Relic was a good pickup, so now even if Artificer gets answered, we'll still get to 5 mana for the Mightstone. And Chrome Dome plus Mightstone is also quite the combo. Getting to copy it and take something else out or draw 2 cards each turn. Ragavan a little late to the party. And we even drew a Mox Opal. Okay, so how about a Relic? Since we don't have an artifact land to immediately play the Mightstone. Looks like they have some interaction actually here. We're going for Opal. And then I want to keep an extra blocker back for Ragavan. So as opposed to charging the Relic, I'll just keep 2 1/3s back. And then I can just draw 2 with this. And VV. That's probably worth taking out, actually. And a Lodestone Golem, don't mind if I do. Alright, so goodbye VV. And say hello to Lodestone Golem. No attacks. And then Chrome Dome can still activate on Mightstone, or we can look at Krang, which our opponent might counter. So I don't have to play into it, because I have 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 mana. I kind of like the Mightstone gambit here, to be honest. And then we'll keep the original. I guess I don't get a chance to tap that for 2 mana. And we'll just draw 2 cards. Suppose I could have kept a copy and then tapped it for 2 to do it again. But then end of turn it goes away. Alright, Karn does get taxed by the Lodestone, so wouldn't be able to cast it. So just attack with Lodestone Golem. Can charge up the Relic. Opponent's gonna bounce the Lodestone. Fair enough. Can also activate Chrome Dome at instant speed. So we could actually still activate this. Which is probably better than charging up the Relic. And maybe we should just deal with Ragavan. So I don't have to worry about it anymore. And then again, don't have to go for Krang when we can double spell. Start with Karn and then play Lodestone after. If we are worried about our opponent storming off, having Lodestone in play is great, but we could also maybe just keep up the Mightstone ability with Chrome Dome. So there's a lot to consider. But each turn that goes by, we're pulling further and further ahead. So it's kind of on the opponent to break the stalemate. Alright, looks like our opponent may have disconnected. Karn will make a Power Stone. Cast Lodestone. And then we can charge up the Relic. Get our speed up for what it's worth. And next turn we can maybe deal the finishing blow with Krang. But yeah, it was fun getting to activate Chrome Dome a bunch. So their commander costs 5 mana, they would have to tap out for it. And we could immediately remove it by copying the Mightstone. But at this point we're just flying over for lethal. Make sure to charge this up. And get an extra mana. Alright, and our opponent scoops it up. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw, facing Grub, Rakdos, Goblins. So definitely a scary matchup, since they have a lot of Lords to pump up their team. Overseer likely to get removed. So this hand is basically on the strength of Moonsilver Key getting Forsaken Monument, which can then double our mana to cast Krang. Don't know if that's quite good enough, because I don't have any acceleration necessarily to get Monument down a turn early, which is kind of what we need. Yeah, I think I mulligan. This is a slight improvement. Mystic Forge does allow us to at least play a grindy game, but I'm still looking for some more acceleration. And then of course Ugin, another powerful curve topper if we can get to it. I don't think Overseer is going to be great in this matchup, since they probably have some cheap ways to get rid of it. So I'm looking for more ramp cards. Our opponent's definitely dedicated to the goblins here, with the sleeve and the companion as well. So yeah, Transformer. We drew an artifact lane, so we could enable Metalcraft if we draw the Mox. Although I imagine the plan is Mystic Forge next turn. And hope they don't have too much artifact removal. Pashalik can also make additional tokens. And then Artificer could be a fine draw, so I don't need to get rid of it. So next turn we can maybe double spell. Pile Driver is scary when you don't have any blockers. Can deal a lot of damage. And they can give it haste here with Goro Goro. So that's gonna significantly shorten our clock. Now Prospector as well can ramp out all sorts of goblins. So not going for haste. We'll take our turn. Ornithopter on top I could also cast. Start there. And an Obelisk. Could play that as well. So next turn we can hope for Ugin, even if the Ornithopter dies. And then Ugin makes enough mana to cast another colorless spell, so we can try to clean up a little bit. 3-3 City makes an extra mana for Beetlebank Chief. And they're gonna make a mana, deal damage with Pashalik, so yeah, they can easily deal with Ornithopter. So how much does the pile driver attack for each other attacking goblin? But it looks like they're not done casting spells, so probably going for more goblins from hands, the bomber. So yeah, we don't have much time here. Are we just dead right now if they sack their goblins second main? We might be. Yeah, we are 2, so they can just sack 2 more goblins to the Prospector and finishes off with Pashalik. So we didn't have enough time to get to Ugin, sadly. But yeah, the Overseer also would have gotten mowed down right away. Jeez. We'll go out on our own terms with Mystic Forge. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw, facing Nahiri, Forged in Fury, so equipment. Our hand's a little slow to get off the ground, even though our late game is powerful. Inspector doesn't discount Ugin, so I think we can do better. Alright, we get to start with the Gemstone Caverns, so I guess we can't complain. And then Battlesphere probably goes. Just try to ramp out Krang and hope that's good enough. Turn 1 Freya can ramp out some artifacts. So the next turn can start with the Weathermaker. The Forge Master, another equipment card. And next turn we could already play the Mightstone and Weakstone, maybe draw 2 cards. And unlike the Eldrazi decks where your payoff is not an artifact, we can actually use this to cast our commander. Opponent surveilling here. Might see a 3-mana equipment. Ooh, Colossus Hammer. At least they weren't able to equip it for free yet. Okay, so still in favor of drawing with the Mightstone. Could maybe draw into a 2-mana artifact that I can still cast. Not quite. Next turn with a land, this could make 2 mana. Opponent's actually going to destroy our Mightstone here with Wear Tear. Usually reserved as a sideboard card, but I guess it's flexible enough where you can main deck it in Brawl. Okay, so that sets us back on mana bits, but we'll still have a fine turn here. So I could Sculpting Steel copy Weathermaker before playing a land, and then I could still play Solemn, which is also good at enabling landfall. Cloud Key, copy Cloud Key is also pretty tempting, because then we can discount our artifacts by 2. Can play Sculpting Steel, copy Cloud Key, and then I can play 1-mana Obelisk, and we'll still have enough mana to play Solemn afterwards. So we got to empty out our entire hand. Alright, not bad. Seven mana Krang coming up. And then we just want to draw more artifact creatures. Feast and Famine can make us discard. Should have maybe played the Gardens instead of one of these other lands. Alright, the Mirror I can still play, so yeah. Play Krang, play the Mirror. And I could just attack for, what is it here, 13. Or I could leave a blocker back to block Freya. That also makes sense to me. Since we have a 2-turn clock regardless, could even just send Krang and leave 2 blockers back. Firion can maybe copy an equipment they play. And they found a Commander's Plate, a new addition. But yeah, we can double block Freya, they don't get to trigger it, and next turn we have them on the way back. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing Hearthhull, a landfall. Not the easiest matchup by far. We do have a promising hand, assuming Ultima survives. And I could even pitch Ugin to the Labyrinth, which is pretty fitting. And then immediately play Automaton. And then later we can hopefully get Ugin back. Opponent's gonna have plenty of fetch lanes to enable landfall. And then the spacecraft is quite scary once they get it going. But yeah, next turn I can already play Ultima, so they don't have a lot of time to answer it. Hierarch. So we just cast it. Attack for 2. And Excavator to replay the fetch. That's fine. Okay, so next turn I should be able to play Krang already. Which seems like the play. Cannot quite return Ugin. Well, I could return Ugin and cast it actually. So that seems even better. Because I'll still be able to play the Transformer. Exile both of your permanents once we play Transformer, and then next turn I can easily play Krang and go over the top. So yeah, Ugin's Labyrinth is quite powerful when it works out, and also goes to show why Ancient Tomb got banned. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing Heliod, blue-white, flash, enchantments. What do we think of our hand? Could have used a 2-drop, but I think it's good enough. Start with Grey Havens to scry, maybe we'll still pick up something cheaper. And then we get to discount our artifacts while making all non-artifacts more expensive. Mox Opal. That is tempting, although it's gonna take a while to enable here. So I think I can do better. That's where the artifact lanes are also very useful. Tezzeret could tutor up the Mox once again, although our opponent does have 2 mana up. So maybe we'll start with a Weathermaker. See if that resolves. It does not. So now we're hoping for a land. Which we did not get. So then I guess we'll try Tezzeret this time. Even though I can't quite enable the Mox next turn. So then it still doesn't help me cast a Lodestone, which is kind of the priority. Let's try maybe a Cloud Key. Name artifacts. And this turn we could double spell at least. Could go a Relic into Lodestone, assuming this resolves. Could also wait to try and kick this. Although we have a lot of must-counter cards in hand, Mystic Forge, Lodestone. So if they counter the Relic, I'm pretty happy. Could also play Key and then get our 5 mana artifact to double our mana. We'll see if they deal with a lodestone. Alright, so that's gonna now tax their non-artifact spells. Bones being patient. Gotta hope they don't have Farewell, since that would be a blowout. For now, donate Moonsilver Key, get the monuments, maybe start with Tezzerets. Opponent's gonna counter that one, so I can still key activate, which we can do at instant speed, and should be safe to attack. And again, if they counter the monuments, Mystic Forge is kind of the more important card here, to be honest. Three steps with Spree. The opponent's definitely more of a control deck. Activate Forge. Also have an Inventor's Fair, which can tutor up an artifact. And our opponent taps out for Orrery. Does not get taxed by the Golem, that one. Okay, so they still have 5 mana up here. Or 4 mana for non-artifacts. Let's use the Forge. So I still can't quite play Krang somehow. Yeah, I guess we just hit for 5. Can actually pick up a desert here with the Archway. See what's on top, and then still cast this. Alright, so we're finally getting some value off our Mystic Forge. Flashraker can also do some damage. Possible they have a board wipe, but should be able to recover. And Dismissal into Supreme Verdict, okay. Not sure why they cast the Dismissal first. I guess they maybe just misclicked and they scooped it up. Alright, that's a shame, although, yeah, we were still in pretty good shape here with the Mystic Forge casting additional spells off the top. So sooner or later we would have buried them. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing Hei Bai once again, 5-color shrines. My hand's got a Moonsilver Key, can maybe get Forsaken Monuments, but feels a little slow here. Don't have any artifact lands where we can maybe Tezzeret, get a Mox Opal. So I think we can do better. Alright, this might be a slight improvement. And then I'll immediately scry to look for some direction. We've got some early ramp, maybe missing some 4 and 5 mana plays. And we can also eventually use Archway to pick up the Grey Havens again. For now, Cold Steel, since we don't need the untapped mana. And a Utopia Sprawl. So they could still cast a 2-drop. It's going to be Haywire Might, which can actually get rid of an artifact here. Although they didn't tap the right colors if they wanted to still do that. So in the face of a Haywire Might, we're kind of happy just playing a bunch of cheaper artifacts, as opposed to playing a more expensive one. So yeah, I could go Iron Crag plus Mindstone. And then just play the Archway. And if they feel inclined to destroy the Mind Stone, that's fine by me. Opponent taps out for Hei Bai. At least the Might cannot exile artifact creatures, so it won't be able to get rid of our commander. And Ugin was quite a draw. Alright. Say no to the Foundry. Play Ugin, exile Hei Bai. And then Weathermaker, exile Utopia Sprawl looks good enough. Well, our draw certainly came together. So now they gotta deal with Ugin. And we'll have Krang breathing down their neck. Sanctum is acceptable. So we'll make some mana. Play Krang. Exile your Sanctum, and then next turn Karn can make a Construct.
Fate flows as easily as water.
Could have also drawn a card here since we didn't strictly need the extra mana. Alright, they did have a Swords to Plowshares, so that's a pretty nice answer to Krang. Back to the command zone. Should still be able to recast it. But the Wolfwillow Haven's gonna be gone. So they're gonna use the Might while they can. That's fine. Take our turn. Pretty sure we'll need the mana this time. And I could still recast Krang anyways. Or we can take it slow just to make sure we're not gonna get punished by another removal spell. Get the Gilded Lotus going, and a Thunderhulk. And then next turn we should easily be able to empty out our hands and attack for lethal. On to the next one. Alright, we're on the draw, facing a Wrench, which is gonna try to steal stuff from our deck. I don't think Sundering Titan's great here against mono black. The 6-drops are decent, but they're also a bit clunky when we have 2 of them. So I would rather take a mulligan. And this seems a bit more balanced. Still want a few extra lands. And they seem to have a discard spell on one. Yeah, if they take the Iron Crag, we could be in a bit of trouble. It's a Ghost Vacuum instead. That I don't really care about. Play Iron Crag. And then next turn maybe Physic. Medallion to discount black spells by 1. Yeah, our hand has not improved. Could still command for 1 just to draw a card, try and hit a lane drop, which might be more important. Say no to Ultima. We found a lane and we get to scry once again. Keep the Fomori Vault. And I'll keep the Scion token as opposed to casting Automaton, even though they might remove it here. That's fine. Yeah, we should be in the end step, so won't have the chance to play Automaton anymore. But next turn with a lane I can still play the Elevator into Physic. So maybe it was worth it to play Automaton if we suspected removal. I guess Wrench now also gets to look at the top, so I guess we're no longer guaranteed a land. Yeah, it's a shame. So then the play was probably not to sack the token, still drew land anyway. Because yeah, our late game's looking great here, it's just a matter of getting to it. then I should maybe station on the off chance that we get to 20 counters. Opponent's got our Karn as well as our Urza's Cave. And actually have some artifacts in place, so the construct's 3-3. And goodbye Physic. Okay, what's the plan? Could just play Krang. And that'll make stuff indestructible going forward. So they would need a pretty specific answer. And then it's probably fine to deal with the Planeswalker first. Again, I'm happy to play a grindy game, so we want to shut off any of their resource generators.
I will return.
And then a leveler with haste is pretty appealing. Ooh, Shieldred. That's the perfect answer to Krang. Yeah, that hurts. With Phyrexian Tower and Virtue, they could technically recast it over and over. So we'll have to take a different approach. A leveler, destroy Shieldred doesn't seem particularly appealing here. So maybe this is Automaton plus Inner Sun. And then still try and set up Krang before we play leveler for the 1-2 punch. And then we'll get ahead on resources in the meantime. And then I may as well station since we're probably not blocking. Fleshraker's not bad. So they have 2 cards in hand. They're gonna sack their commanders so they can recast it, while tormenting the Fleshraker. Okay. We have most of our curve toppers in hand, so this shouldn't be too bad. Even something like Ugin cannot exile our colorless spells. A Monument is a card. Okay, so I can play that first. These all tap for colorless, just double checking. Still gonna be a little bit short of playing Krang. But wow, opponent just scoops it up to the Monument. Yeah, I mean, we could still follow up with either Leveler or Battle Sphere, and then Krang next turn is going to be trivial. So we get to see this colorless artifact ramp deck in action, and yeah, Krang is the perfect curve topper for this type of strategy, giving us a reliable way to close out the game in just 1 or 2 attacks. So we don't really need many other finishers in this deck, which is pretty useful, because that makes the deck much more consistent when we can just focus on ramping and getting to 9 mana in the first place. But of course we can sprinkle in some other 7 and 8 drops that can maybe mix things up a little bit, but usually want to avoid other 9 mana cards, because then this is when we want to cast our commander. So yeah, that's going to do it for today's gameplay. I want to thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.